I have been documenting shamanic shrine worship on Jeju Island, South Korea for the last 5 years. Jeju Island is a beautiful, once more remote place than it is today, located about 60 kilometers south of mainland South Korea. My interest was piqued in shamanism and shamanic shrine worship a few years ago when I was working on a related project with Korean friends. I became addicted to the thrill of discovering new shrines and hearing ancestor myths that were related to me by village residents. I heard amazing stories everywhere I went, stories of faith and stories of survival. And these stories seemed to get more and more interesting as time went by. I felt an obligation to do this work as so much about these minority polytheistic religions have been misrepresented. On Jeju Island, as is the case across the Eurasian continent, knowledge of these religions was deliberately suppressed by governments and other forces. So I decided to make a documentary. I wanted to make a record of the culture, but also to give a voice to a people who have suffered great hardship and whose religion has been censored from history. And this is Jeju Island's religion. I don't want to leave you with the impression that this religion is only in a village here or there. It's in every village. It's in the villages around this school. It's just not so accessible because of the culture gap between the two generations. It is my belief that as natural as dams are to beavers, as webs are to spiders, and nests to birds, shrines are to humans. On Jeju Island, shrines are like joint art projects that have been created and maintained by island residents over hundreds of years. They are the ultimate outsider art, consisting of stone walls, the individual stones of which have been stacked and restacked by thousands of hands over scores of generations. The offerings left at shrines are unique to each village, and most splendidly, their myths, the Bonpuri, the myths of how the gods came to be the ancestor gods of their villages, are also distinct. All effective healing shrines in the world have the common component of myth attached to them. I want to introduce you to a couple of the shrines that I explored over the years. I have returned to these places many times to shoot parts of my documentary, Spirits, the story of Jeju Island Shamanic Shrines. But I didn't just make a film about the shrines. I did years of research. I collected recordings of myths recited by shamans and interviewed hundreds of people to make a real record of individual stories. Over the last couple years, I made a point to photograph people I met along the way. I'm just going to show you two of the shrines today. There's not much time, so I chose a couple that I thought would be representative of the culture. The first shrine is in everyone's favorite beachside village called Woljang. The great shaman, or Kun Shimbang in Jeju's native language, is the 7th generation in her line to be responsible for the shrine. You can see her here in the foreground of the photo. Now, what is a shaman? That is a big topic for another day, but for the purpose of this talk, know that on Jeju Island, a shaman called Shimbang is essentially a village priest. Shimbang share a lot of the same responsibilities that religious leaders do all over the world. A country pastor in the Protestant sects of America, for example, or a Catholic priest for that matter. There are, of course, many differences in the details. The stories of how village shamans came to have their positions are really interesting and often involve a certain amount of suffering. This fits in with the pattern of the wounded healer found in shamanism and other faiths around the world. Myth is extremely important to shrine culture. Shincheon Village's myth is one of my favorites. The heroine of the myth is Miss Hyun, an actual historical person who lived some 300 years ago. Every morning, this young girl would circulate the roads of her village, shouting out the wind conditions, of which there are many, so the women abalone divers would know what kind of work they could perform that day safely. We can't talk about Jeju Island without talking about the women divers, the now famous Haenyeo, or sea women. This diving work is treacherous work, entailing free diving to great depths, and sometimes holding one's breath for up to 2 minutes. In the end of the myth, in Shincheon Village, Miss Hyun's brother dies at sea. A gift he bought from her on the mainland, a set of ritual clothes, along with his grandmother, along with his body, washed ashore with the tide. The women divers of Shincheon village still hang those sort of clothes, a gift to Miss Hyun in the shrine tree today. Now the shamans on Jeju Island have quite a daunting responsibility in dealing with people's stress and their everyday stresses, their everyday lifestyles. But more importantly in this era is the deep trauma that has plagued Jeju Island. Starting in 1948, there were a series of massacres carried out at the behest of the national government, where some 30,000 people, accused of being communist, were killed in cold blood. I won't show you photographs of the mass graves or of people weeping every year at the annual memorial ceremonies, but they are out there, and you can easily find them online. Amongst Jeju Island's elderly community are many survivors of this horrific period, which is commonly referred to as the April 3rd incident, the April 3rd uprising, or simply the April 3rd massacre. I want to show you a short video clip about the relationship, about how the relationship between a woman and the shrine goddess of her village helped her to survive after her entire extended family was killed. This woman was trapped in her home with daily visitations from hostile soldiers, coping with a sick son and expecting a new baby daughter. In the most desperate of situations, she turned to the grandmother goddess for help.
난 요게 좀 시원하냐 난.
예.
천천히 잘고는 말밖에 나못 알아들어.
아, 할머니 그 당 가보신 적 있으시죠?
어디 땅?
어디 땅?
할망당.
할망당?
할망당.
예, 눈미당.
와산이면 와산이요 회사.
네, 네.
와산.
와산요.
오늘이 며칠이랴?
What is today?
더워. 미치겠는 거나 뭐. 뭔 잊어버려. 겉쟁이도 어딜로 불리를 못 찾아. 응?
제주도가 고향이지?
여기가 고향.
응.
저기 친정은 저
어디?
수기동에는 와을리 수기동에는 그 먼 불탑은 서점 사건에 불탑인데 이게 사람경이도 몇 가오실 거라 더 가위 사신디 친정 식구들도 다 죽어불고 거기에 정은한 나도 여기 살아도 여기 살려면 살란 분은 서삼사건 당의 분은 남편도 일러불고
그때 맛이?
그때
남편도
예 어디간 죽은 줄도 몰라 죽은 터도 못 쳤고 저 행무소에 가긴 가신디 아이고 경인 사는 게 무슨 말을 뭐냐고 그런 거야. 사람이 옆집이 죽어도 모르고 뒷집이 죽어도 모르고.
그 돌에 할머니 있는 거잖아요.
그 돌을 그 집안에 있어.
그죠? 그래서 할머니 그 안에 있잖아요. 그 할머니.
그 할머니는 연급이 하도 조난에 뭘 탄 양반이 그 길로 요영 길이영 그 요만서 그 길이나 그냥이 글로 저 어디 서울 성안도 그때 말이 시행 아니 그래 성안 정이 그 정이 성안 대정 가는 사람이 글로 넘어갈 때 도비찜을 정 넘어갈 때 미식을 물색이나 뭐 썰이나 그 물건 장심인 뭐 물건을 뭐 그런 걸 뭐 표적을 하나 기억하영 하면 그 사람이 고향 넘어가고 이제 그 사람이 그날강 장시도 잘 되고 나도 그런 얘가 있어. 아기를 시방 큰아들 3살에 아버지 잃는 아기 이걸 아기가 경 못 살 때에 아니 그 물건살에 해변 간호란 분은 아기가 막 포를 나판 그냥 힘서 3살 그 정은 4살이 되겠죠. 4살 나는 애 봄이라서 이제 포를 무슨 막 하는 거라.
애기가?
애기가 팔 아파. 아니 이제는 어디가 죄는 사람은 영 죄영 영어영 죄여가민 요디만 심은 죄여가민 그냥 아가 막 그냥 막 감장을 도랑 그냥 죽지 살지 새카만 죄여도 아니 되고 약을 해도 아니 되고 유영요래 나오나네 동네 사람 하는 말이야. 아이 초상도 씻고 아기 병원에 강 아이벼왕 경 힘찐 소리엔 그때는 이제 아기를 넣은 주천을 가늘에 넣은 주천 우리 셋다바지가 있어. 그 병원에 가면 일로 끼친대라는 거라.
응?
팔을 일로 자른다고.
아.
죄변 약하래. 그땐 그 약도 약방이 어디 심은 그런 게 없었거든. 어선안에 있던 그 소주한 사람 어디서 미신 거영 약허여민 교민 이젠 다른 사람도 그 사람한테 이 사람도 그 사람한테 경험인 그 사람이 크게 소문나듯이 경은한 어느 그 경은 사람한테 일간안에 아명아명이 약을 써보려니 우란 그 약을 써도 낫진 아니고 펄이 진짜로 이 옷을 뱉기도 못하고 그냥 이디가 그냥 이만한 시커먼 이젠 허단 버치난 아닌 게 아니고 참 돈도 없고
그냥
돈도 없고 미시가 상 먹일 돈도 없고 입질 것도 없어 내 아기가 그치로 괴노난 그 할머님한테 가는 것도 뭐 별다르게 행할 게 없어. 아이 그들 가오는 약도 아무것도 아니도 그냥
진짜 맛이.
그냥 이제 어느 패적이랑 옷이 벌을 옷 벗기자면 니랑 기도 아파나신데 이제 어느 벌인지 알도 못해.
Completely better?
Yeah,
From the halbang?
예.
잘 알아들었대가.
네네네.
경은한 다른 사람도 부디 펄뿐이 아니고 못 견디면 부스레미가 못 견디나 뭘 구안하지 못하면 그들 가오는 게 강하면 좋아. 그냥 그 맛에 본향연 하는 거죠.
In this case, the entire village was burnt to the ground, and the few survivors were forced to flee. Those that did survive still live in nearby villages further down the mountain. The shrine that is located in the old destroyed village is called Shamanic Shrine, and it came to fame 2 years ago when its holy trees were deliberately cut. The message the desecration was sending was clear. The perpetrators were saying to the survivors and their families that they were no longer welcome to practice their religion on the very land that used to be theirs. This wasn't the first time that Shamanic Shrine had been desecrated, I later learned. I felt responsibility to talk about the issue of Shamanic, and I felt this responsibility because so many people in the area had been really open to me, and they had shared their stories with me. These were stories that weren't being talked about. The destruction of shrines was very much going underreported. So some local friends and I, we decided to make a group to rebuild the shrine. We started by making a safe path to the altar. Our bigger message was that in the face of old prejudices and unbridled development, the Jeju Island sanctuary should be left intact, as they are holy places for traditional islanders. The townspeople did indeed return to worship at the shrine. Later, they thanked us for our efforts, but said that until the shrine was officially protected by law, that they feared the situation would continue. These two women, now in their late 70s, are survivors from the area. I consider myself very lucky to have spoken with people who survived such hardships. Shamanic was not the only shrine to be destroyed during my 5-year project. In fact, I counted around 8 shrines that had been destroyed during that time. Some examples of these shrines would be the shrine in Yere village, where the women divers celebrated the famous Yeongdung gods. The several hundred-year-old shrine tree was cut and the shrine wiped away to provide space for a single unit of this huge tourist complex. The village has been embroiled in legal conflict over the development since its inception. In the town of Sungsan, 2 shrines were destroyed despite nearby Sunrise Peak being designated as a UNESCO protected site. Local businesses profit from the divers. Local businesses often use the divers' image in their advertisements. But yet the community failed to protect these same divers' shrines, their most sacred sanctuaries. This woman was brought to tears when talking with me about the recent incident. She had prayed at the shrine all of her life. The shrine that the woman had been praying about was located here in this small parking lot. Actually, I visited the parking lot and there were between 50 and 100 spaces available there. The shrine that only took up 2 of these spaces could have easily been saved. Jeju Island shrines are deeply tied to the island's past, to the trauma and struggles that the people of the island have faced. I believe these shrines should remain now as they always have been, as natural sanctuaries, places of prayer, and ritual centers. These shrines represent a common polytheistic shamanic heritage that we share across national boundaries. When our traditional heritage lands and sanctuaries are desanctified, I believe there is something in the community and in the human spirit that is lost. These spaces give us identity through myths, community, and personal solace. Above all, in the case of Jeju Island, they give us healing. Well, this talk shouldn't end on a negative note, and I'm not just saying that because these talks are supposed to end upbeat. Right now is the right time for humanity to save its shamanic shrines. In fact, this is a conversation that's happening all over the world. For instance, the country of Estonia has been making serious efforts to protect its shamanic shrines over the last few years, and I believe there are around 500 of them. In our complex world, we need sacred spaces, and I don't want to leave you with the impression that I, as a foreign person here, am the only person working on this issue. There are plenty of local activists and artists and researchers and other interested people that are very much trying to make a difference. This is likely the case in a majority of regions around the world where such cultural treasures are being threatened, from Estonia to India to South America to here in South Korea. I will say this, keep these shrines as they are. Maintain them as holy places. The gods know we need more of that in the world today. And lastly, I want to leave you with some images that might be surprising of healing shrines from around the world.